But I think as a creative and as a musician and as someone that wants to do something that we're proud of and that inspires us, it is finding that balance of like, I want it to be super cool, or I want it to be like what I'm doing super awesome and super rad. But I think at the end of the day, for worship and what we're trying to accomplish on a Sunday morning with our church, with our congregation, cool is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to worship God. And there is an element of like, we want to bring our best offering. We want to bring our best ideas, our best abilities. Like, I'm all about that. But it is a balance. It's a balance of finding like, what is that paired with our goal for Sunday is to worship God and to almost like get out of the way to let Him do His thing and to draw the attention off of us onto Him. And it's a balancing act.
Welcome to the Worship Ministry Training Podcast, a monthly podcast for worship leaders who are serious about growing in their craft and calling. My name is Alex, fellow worship leader. Super stoked you're here. And if you're a new listener, I'm going to encourage you to hit that subscribe button because every single month, I'm going to give you helpful, practical guidance that you can immediately implement into your ministry. Hit that subscribe button and then go back through the past 9 years of episodes and binge listen your way to a healthier ministry. And if you're someone who is really serious about growing as a worship leader, I'm going to point you to the Worship Ministry Training Academy. What is the Academy? It's an online training platform that will give you everything you need to build a thriving worship ministry. You'll get 10 in-depth courses on topics like set building, team building, musical excellence, vocal technique, and more. You'll get live monthly training workshops on topics that are relevant to you. You'll get exclusive expert interviews with some of the best worship leaders in the world. You'll get done-for-you ministry admin systems and audition process, onboarding documents, team training materials, and even team discipleship materials. We will take care of you so you can focus on leading your team. If that sounds like something that would be of help to you, you can try the Worship Ministry Training Academy for just $1 by going to worshipministrytraining.com. Sign up today for your $1 trial, and I hope to see you inside of the Academy. All right, let's get into today's episode. How do we help our bands sound better? And how do we really create parts and arrangements to our songs to really elevate them and elevate our times of worship to be more impactful and expressive? I am here today with the one and only Mack Brock to get all of his juicy tips about how we can better arrange our songs and instrumentation for our worship services. So Mack, welcome back to the podcast. It's so good to see you, brother.
Hey, what's up, Alex? How are you doing?
Good, man. How has life been? It's been quite a bit of time since we've connected. Last time we talked, you had just stepped away from Elevation Worship. So give us a quick update and then we'll get into some arrangement gold tips.
Man, that was a long time ago. I told you right before we started, you were asking like what I've been up to. And I basically said, I'm doing the exact same thing that I've been doing since I was 18 years old. It's just leading worship, writing songs, recording music. The only difference is that I have 3 kids now and a wife. And so that's another layer of responsibility. But yeah, things are good. I just released a new record about a month ago today. Yeah, so doing that.
It's awesome. I listened to about 5 of the songs before I jumped on the call with you, and it sounds incredible. I'm really excited to tell the people about the record, which we will at the end. And if you do not know Mack Brock, you should. He was really foundational to what everybody knows about Elevation Worship. Like, Mack got them not just off the ground, but into the stratosphere. So he wrote, performs, and produced songs like "Oh Come to the Altar," "Do It Again," "Resurrecting," all these songs that really elevated Elevation Worship into the orbit. You were foundational to that. And so what I want to talk with you about today, Mack, because so many worship leaders struggle with like how to get their bands to sound good and how to arrange the song so that it's not just mud or not just like chaos or not just busyness or ugliness. But even listening to your album with my Apple AirPod Pros, I was like, dude, the parts in here are so good and so intricate and interplaying. So I want to talk to you about parts, arrangements, and all that stuff. And so what are kind of the guiding principles that you think about when you're coming to a song to arrange it, whether it's a song that you wrote or it's a song that you're arranging with a worship band at church? What are some of the guiding principles that you keep in your mind to building a song and adding parts to it?
Yeah, so I think that is a big question, and that's such an important question. Songwriting and song creation is such a mystery in a lot of ways. Like, who knows how these ideas come into place? Who knows where they come from, other than the muscle of like doing it over and over and over again. So my mom is a drummer. I grew up playing in bands with her. I grew up playing with her at church. And I am not a drummer, but I think being under her influence, drums have always been the most important thing to me. Like from day one, that's what I think about when I think about music the most, is like, what are the drums doing? And I think in worship music, that is such a key part because to me, before hooks, before instrumentation and all that, one of the most important parts about worship music is the dynamics. And drums have like the biggest play on the dynamics of a song. And
Mhm.
so, what's the journey of the song and how does it ebb and flow and go from the mountains to the valleys and the dynamics of it? And so, if I have a song and it's just acoustic memo right now or it's a piano memo, the thing that I'm first thinking about before we put it to like tape is what are the dynamics? Does the song start big and then drop down? Does it have that gradual build all the way up to this like big crescendo on the bridge? Or where are we at? And so that's the starting point for me. And then what builds around that, that's when you start figuring out the hooks. That's when you start figuring out what's the driving force. Is this a piano song? Is it an acoustic song or whatever? All stems from what is the dynamics of the journey of this song.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So you're playing it on your guitar, you're playing it on the piano, and you're thinking like, what's the energy level of each section of this song? And then how do the drums fit into that? Now, like you said, it's an art and a science and a mystery. Like it really is a
Yes.
mystery, but like, what about like drum beats? Because you're right. I think drum is core. You know, everybody says worship leader owns the bus, but the drummer drives the bus. Drums are core. So like, how do you think about drum beats versus melody of the lead vocal? How are you coming up with like, okay, what kind of beat? Because the beat can change the entire feel of the
Yeah.
song, and you can choose like 10 different beats to fit into your song. So I know these are like probably questions that maybe you haven't like super thought through before, but I like
No,
to
I
get
have.
into. Okay, great. Tell us, please. Thank you.
Yeah. No, it's so funny. I was playing an event recently with Lee Worley, who is a drummer for all like the early elevation stuff. He's a worship leader now in Charleston. But me and him, I mean, we worked so closely on drums back in like early elevation days. And listening back, and I'm talking like early, like For the Honor is the album. Me and Lee were so obsessed with creating these hyper intense drum moments or hyper intricate drum parts. And that was like a season. And we were like very focused on that. And that was like the most important thing to us. And then as I've grown as a producer, as a songwriter, and as a worship leader, I've become less fixated on that. I still care so much about drums. I care so much about what the drums are doing, but I care more about the feel of it. And so I care less about, is this drum fill awesome? Is this complicated and interesting? And will drummers think this is cool? Which I used to be obsessed with that. I just care like, how does this feel in the song? Does the drum beat just need to be as simple as doom, ta, doom, ta? Is that better for the song than it is to have like an interesting beat or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't have a rule of like, here's how you figure that out, or here's like the guidelines to make sure like the kick pattern is like what it needs to be, other than getting into the room with people and experimenting and trying it out, or sitting with your drum pad. I do a
Mm-hmm.
lot of like early producing just by myself on my computer with no band. And so it's just like trying different things to figure out like what feels best. And for the most part, I think, especially with worship, there is an element where all the instruments, including drums, need to just make way for the melody, for the lyric, and need to just kind of clear the path for what's being said and what's being spoken in those songs.
Yeah. I don't know if you agree or disagree with this, but I think you kind of just said it, which is the drums and everything else should support the melody, right? So one of the things I think about is I kind of will have my drummers play the drum pattern that almost is underneath the melody or matches. So I'm thinking of the song like We Fall Down by the old Chris Tomlin song, right? Like We Fall Down. So I would almost go like boom, boom, boom. So it's like the kick and the snare
Oh
are
yeah, yeah,
almost
yeah.
right under the melody, because you could go like boom, boom, boom. Like you could do that, but then it's not really bolstering the melody. And so, what do you have any
Yeah,
thoughts
yeah.
about the kick and snare pattern to support melody, or any thoughts like that?
It's kind of a case by case basis. You saying that has got me thinking. I've always heard that song in that way as well.
Uh-huh.
And, following like the melody in that sense. I have gotten more like, let's simplify everything. I think that there is like a case by case basis to where certain songs you are going to feel like it needs to have some sort of syncopation, some sort of rhythm with what's going on. Like I've got a song on my new record called Bless the Lord that has that kind of beat that's following the melody, and it just kind of creates this like bouncy energy. But then other times I would say the melody might be so intricate or so like syncopated that the drums need to fall back to make room for the melody to do that and to not overwhelm the song. And so I think it's a little bit of, this is such a non-answer, but a little bit of like case by case, what are you feeling like in the moment? Also, there might be moments in a song where it is that syncopation with the melody as it's kind of building the song. But then there might be a moment in the song where it just opens up to where the drums totally get out of the way, but they're big and they're full and they're like a lot of space that just opens up the song. And so you can even do both through the progression of the actual song.
Yeah. In terms of starting with drums, starting with dynamics, then you start to layer in other stuff. So as you're arranging a song, whether it's for your album or in a live band setting, what's the next thing you're thinking about as you're arranging? Is it the hooks? Is it the rhythmic subdivided stuff? What's next for you in terms of arranging, and how should worship leaders be? Not that they have to mimic your approach, but what is your approach?
Yeah, I think the secondary thing for me is kind of what's the driving force of the song. And in worship music, it'll usually either be like electric guitars, an acoustic guitar, or piano. And naturally, I think just in our world and what we do, acoustic and piano are the most highlighted instruments. And I think that that's just because as worship leaders, we want to be able to control where we're going, what we're doing, not be bound to a specific structure even of a song. We want to be able to flow. We can naturally flow best with an instrument that can be played by itself and it feel okay. And so that's acoustic and piano. And so a lot of times for me, after I know the dynamics of the song, then it's like, all right, is this an acoustic song or is this a piano song or is this a rock song? And then I start building from there. Honestly, hooks kind of come last for me of figuring out, because even with hooks, I'm thinking about those like how are they accenting the song as a whole. And so I'll build out everything else. I'll build out the acoustics, I'll build out the piano. What is the driving force of the song? How is the dynamics flowing? And now we take a step back and say, okay, what are the hooks that are going to support this? And then occasionally in that hook process, sometimes you're going to come across hooks where you're like, oh, that is the song. That's the driving force of the song, even though it's like the last thing that we created.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I thought you were going to say drums, then hooks, but you're saying build out all the other stuff. Hooks are last.
That's for
I
me.
think, yeah, no, that's good. So, like the song "Resurrecting," do 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 do. Is that
Yeah.
the right song? Am I singing the right one?
That's
No.
like dun dun
Oh,
dun
bump. Oh, that's right.
dun.
That's right. I'm
Yeah,
thinking of a
yeah, yeah.
different one. So, did that come very last for you in that
Yeah,
arrangement
that
process?
was the last thing that we added to that song
Okay.
was that hook leading into
Yeah,
it.
because it's so central. Like so many of the hooks, like you said, it becomes the song. So talk to us about your approach for hooks, and for anyone listening who's like, "What's a hook?" It's that catchy earworm thing, that melody on the guitar or the piano that you play in between phrases or at the end of the chorus that like gets stuck in your head and kind of gives the song character. What has been your approach to creating good hooks that stay out of the way or do what they're supposed to do?
Again, it's like a mystery. I don't totally know. Similar to like writing a melody for the song is a lot of times it's just sitting with it. Sometimes it's sitting at a piano. I don't play piano very well. So if I'm trying to get out of a creative funk, I'll sit at a piano because I'm not defaulting to just my natural muscle memory things. I'm having to think really hard or I'm having to just be out of my natural comfort zone. And so sometimes it's just living with a song, playing around and seeing if anything catches. Sometimes it's just driving around in a car, listening to the voice memo, singing randomness to see if like something sparks. Those are probably like the two biggest exercises to find hooks, is to just sit with it, sit on an instrument that is outside of my comfort zone, and to mess around with like ideas. I've got this song, it's actually a song that my daughter wrote called The Best God on my
Nice.
new record. That's really precious and really sweet, and she sings on it. And all we had was this like little chorus, this chorus that she sings, and that's just really sweet. But we needed more than that for the actual song. And I lived with that chorus for forever, just singing it over and over and over again. And then I sat down at the piano and I had this idea for this. Oh, oh, that had nothing really to do with the actual chorus, but it became just like the hook that we would sing. And so that's like the main hook of the song now. But it was just me sitting down, playing a progression, and seeing kind of like what naturally comes out of me, whether it's me singing or me fiddling around on the
Mm.
piano. And then there are a lot of times, just to as an encouragement to any of y'all out there, there's a lot of times that I'll come up with a hook. I'd be like, this freaking rules. I love it. And then I realize, oh, I love it because it's a hook from one of my favorite songs that was in the back of my mind that I didn't realize it's the exact same hook. Okay, we got to go back to the drawing board. There's a lot of times that that happens too.
Yeah. As I'm thinking about some of the most iconic hooks, we talked about resurrecting. I'm thinking about Lion and the Lamb, do do
Yeah,
do 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 do, and then dicka dicka da da
yeah,
da. But the
yeah,
first part of that phrase, it's slow. The most iconic hooks, I think, probably are like fewer notes, simpler. I mean, I'm sure there are a few like from like Jesus culture that are like real fast, like
yeah.
guitar stuff, or like Coldplay has some fast guitar hooks. But by and large, I think simple, less notes, and slow seems to be a good approach. I'm just thinking out loud as I'm kind of
Yeah,
listening to you.
totally. I'm thinking too, because there's what's that passion song? I went out of my.
Oh,
That one's
banana.
like one of the fast ones that I can think of that rules. That's like got such a good like energy. But you are right. I think there's a more lenience to like simplicity, finding just that simple hook that grabs you.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back to your previous comment about less is more space. Like I think in worship
Yeah.
music, the secret ingredient, and unfortunately, I see so many worship bands in local churches fail at this. The secret ingredient is simplicity. It's like play less,
It's a
create more
balance, man.
space.
Because as a musician and as a creative, and I think that this goes back to what I was even saying with the drums on those early Elevation records. Like looking back, like I'm still so proud of that. I think it's so sick and like fun. And me and Lee are always like, we'll still be texting about like, dude, it was so sick when we did this, whatever it is. But I think as a creative and as a musician and as someone that wants to do something that we're proud of and that inspires us, it is finding that balance of like, I want it to be super cool, or I want it to be like what I'm doing super awesome and super rad. But I think at the end of the day, for worship and what we're trying to accomplish on a Sunday morning with our church, with our congregation, cool is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to worship God. And there is an element of like, we want to bring our best offering. We want to bring our best ideas, our best abilities. Like, I'm all about that. But it is a balance. It's a balance of finding like, what is that paired with our goal for Sunday is to worship God and to almost like get out of the way to let Him do His thing and to draw the attention off of us onto Him. And it's a balancing act.
Yeah, it's this humble sacrificing of your creative itches to better
Yeah.
serve the general public who aren't super geeky creative like us. They're like,
Yeah.
I just need a straight snare on the 2 and 4, please, because I can't focus when the drums are all bombastic and crazy and like, so you're really
Man, one of the
sacrificing. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say one of the most convicting things that I had as like a young worship leader, and I was a young musician, and young musicians are some of the most arrogant people on the planet. And I, I was very much that way. And I thought like all of my ideas were the best ideas. My taste in music was the best taste in music. And I'll never forget, I was asked to lead a worship song at our church. And I thought it was like such a lame song. I just thought like, this song is not cool. This song sucks. I don't like it. I'm going to lead it, but in my spirit, it was very begrudgingly. And I saw the atmosphere of the room change when we started this song. and I saw people have an encounter with Jesus when we're leading this song, while in my spirit, I was like, this is lame. And it was such a humbling experience. I'm getting chill bumps talking about it. Like, one, like the Lord's grace in my life to allow me to lead worship even in moments where my heart wasn't in it. That's such a sweet grace, and a sweet grace he's had on my life. But it was such a convicting moment of, this is not about me. This is not about my personal preference. This is not about what I think is cool or what I think is awesome. This is about leading God's people. That's my calling. That's what he has assigned me to do. And so it really had a profound impact on the way that I thought about Sunday mornings, and the way that I thought about choosing songs, or the way that I thought
Mm,
about creating songs. It's so much as like, get out of the way, humble yourself, put away all these preconceived notions that you have. Now, that's not to say that I'm not going to try to make the music that I make great, or try to do something that I'm proud of, or try to continue to push myself creatively and all that stuff. But that's just not the goal.
right. Yeah, I think there's a difference. In your case, you're an artist. You're also a worship leader. But like for worship leaders, the goal for Sunday is it's not our creative platform. It's an altar. Like you said, we got to
Yep.
die to ourself. We got to die to our ego. We got to die to our selfish desires. We got to die to our desire to impress people. And we just got to create a stable, solid, clean platform for the general public to be able to nod along, bob their heads, and sing clearly, right? I recently interviewed Charity Gale, and she mentioned that she was picking all these songs that were all complicated and crazy and great for the musicians, and they were having fun with it, but she realized she was losing the congregation. And then she's like,
Yeah.
I gotta back off. One funny story about this, I a long time ago talked to this pastor up in Folsom, California, and he hired as his worship pastor a producer for a lot of Bethel's like really, really big records. And the guy was very artistic, always pushing the boundaries artistically. And one Sunday, he decided to do a 5-minute guitar effects solo with the guitar knobs, like just tweaking all of his effects for 5 minutes. And the pastor was like mortified because the guy for 5 minutes bent down and was doing all this weird, like sonic scaping stuff. And the pastor's
Yes.
like, oh no. And so obviously that guy didn't last long as the worship pastor, but
He
it's
he was ministering to like the two or three guitarists that were in the audience that were like, this is so sick. I love
yes,
this
yes.
part. But at the sacrifice of everybody else.
Yeah. That's so funny. Okay, so simplicity in our hooks, simplicity in our drum parts. Any other tips that you've learned over the years of arranging and just stacking different frequencies and different layers and parts? Like help us. And then I have a question later for like, how do we work with a small band to get a great sound? But just general things you've learned over the years of producing records. What are some things that you just think the average worship leader might not be aware of? It might seem simple to you, Mac, but for someone else, it might be a revelation.
One thing, this sounds like such like an elementary idea, but if you really start to like heed to this, it'll change so much, is don't be afraid to listen to that voice in your head that's trying to guide you. Is there so many times like where I thought an idea was cool, or I thought the dynamic, like I spoke a dynamic and I said, hey, I want to try doing a down bridge in this moment, whatever it might be. And the moment that I did it, I realized, oh, this is a mistake. This is not the way the song should be. But this was my idea. I don't want to go back on my idea. I don't want to confuse the band and be like, hey, we got to bail on this. Like, and so I would almost like silence my own like inner thought to appease whatever was happening in the room, even though I knew it was kind of the wrong call. And so I say that to say, and whether it's in songwriting, whether it's dynamics as you're building out a song or producing a song, we all have this like voice, this guide internally that's telling us, go back. You're not quite there yet. You're not quite done. Don't give up yet. Don't settle for this right now. And I just really had to learn to like trust that. And there are some times where my voice is wrong, my ideas might be wrong, or my instinct might be wrong. And I have people in my band or people that I'm surrounded with that I trust their instinct too. So I'm very much a collaborator. I want to collaborate on like everything. And so I'm constantly like asking second opinions, other thoughts. And so I guess like finding those people is also key. But yeah, like really as a worship leader, you're the one that's leading the room. You're the one that's guiding your people at your church. Trusting your instinct in that with them in mind is such like a key thing.
I think that tip right there, it's understated, but it's so right. The collaboration too, like, is huge because oftentimes you should ask, "Hey guys, what do you think about this? Can we try this?" And then ask them, "What do you think? Does that feel right?" Like, I don't think worship leaders should be afraid to invite that collaboration and be like, "Does that feel right, or does that?" And then they'll tell you, they're
For
like, "No,
sure.
that doesn't feel right." Yeah. So I don't think
Yeah.
that's a,
I-
I think that's a wise
Yeah,
tip.
especially if you trust, especially if you're with people that you trust. There are definitely probably people on your team that you're like not gonna totally trust in a musical sense, and that's okay too. And so like finding those voices that you agree with, that's one of the things like I'm a big believer in like partnering with the pastor, like the lead pastor or whoever's preaching, because a lot of times they're not musicians, they don't know how to communicate, this is what I need the song to do. But they usually do have like a really good heartbeat on the congregation and a heartbeat for the atmosphere, you know? And so they can say, like, yeah, I don't know why this song didn't work, or I don't know why this moment didn't work, or why this 5 minute guitar solo with the effects didn't work. But it didn't. And we got to figure out like what happens. And you as a musician can try to break down, oh, it probably didn't feel good because of this or that or whatever. But I do think like even that collaboration is important, even if they don't know how to communicate musically why. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. And it all goes back to what we talked about earlier, humility and servitude. Like, we are there to serve the church and the song. Here's a comment from Amanda. And by the way, guys, we are going to be doing our Q&A at the end. So please get your questions ready about anything. It could be about arranging, but it could be about anything. But Amanda said, I definitely have had that happen where I try to make a call something, I try it and immediately sense it wasn't the right call.
I mean,
Yeah.
that happens to me still. That happened to me recently where I was like, in my head, I was like, oh, this will be such a great moment to go down instead of big. And it was such the wrong call. But I still like, I was like, let's try it. In the first service, I was like, oh, why did I do this? And then, I had to change after the fact.
One thing I want to talk about too is I talk about this in my musical excellence course, and that is right now we're talking about arranging songs. But for worship leaders, you should also change the way your song's dynamics flow and the arrangements go based on where the song falls in a set. So if you already
Yeah.
have like two down choruses or the whole set is kind of down, then maybe instead of going down where you usually go down, you keep the drums in. And so changing your arrangements based on the overall flow of the set is also a very vital part of arranging, right?
That's such a good point. And there's so many times, like, and this is like a small thing, but this is just an example where it's like, it doesn't make sense to me if we end a song really, really big and then start the next song at like two. I'm almost always will tell my drummer or my band and bass player, say, hey, let's make sure at the start of the song, even though it's "Oh Come to the Altar" and it starts acoustic, I want y'all in up top,
Yep.
toms, bass in. Y'all can drop down for verse one, but I don't want it to be up here and then down here so quick. So that's such a good point.
Yeah. Well, one more overall question about arranging, and I want to talk about subdivisions, but then I want to talk about leading a small band because most churches have 4 or 5 pieces. So we'll talk about that next. So, question about subdivisions, because a lot of worship leaders haven't really been trained to think this way. But when you're arranging a song, you've got two things to work with: the frequency spectrum, the lows to the highs, and the subdivision, like the divisions of rhythm. And when I listen to your albums, your bass is changing on the chords, and then you've got some pianos that are changing on the chords. Some of your electric guitars are changing on the down strums of the chords. But then you've got all these kind of other frequencies filling in subdivisions. Now it could be a percussion, it could be a shaker, it could be a tambourine, it could be synth parts that are arpeggiating, it could be electric guitar like U2 style. So, just in general, talk to worship leaders about arranging all the different instruments to fill up those different subdivisions, and how do you know what to layer? I think the concept might be new to some worship leaders. So how do you do it for your albums?
Yeah, it's so funny hearing you break it down like that. I don't know music theory. I don't know anything like musical. So even you describing it, I'm like, huh, never described, like, I've never thought about it like that. For me, it goes back again to the dynamics. What's the dynamic of the moment of this song? Oh, this is like an open moment where we want space. So it's okay to just have just the bar chords, the diamond strums, and it's just simplify, and we don't
Mm-hmm.
need a lot of stuff to fill in the gaps. But then if the song is starts to build and we want momentum and not just like big and open, but we want like an energy, then it's like, okay, how do we fill this space? And you're right. A lot of times it might just be like a shaker. Sometimes it'll be the type of strumming, or sometimes it'll be a complicated hook or something that is like carrying the energy of it. But I think it just goes to serve what's the dynamic of that song and what's the dynamic of that moment.
Yeah. I love how simple you put it, which is like, what does this section of the song need? What kind of energy do I want to create? And then you just literally subtract frequencies and subdivisions based on the energy you're trying to create. And the more energy you need, then the more people should be playing, basically, right? It's
Yeah.
like, I always say songs should build in intensity and complexity as they crescendo. And at the highest moment, you have the most amount of frequencies and you have the most amount of complexity and subdivision. Complexity does not mean busyness. It means intricacy working together, all these little things working together,
And it's
melodies and
almost
counting noise.
cliche now how drums, how like worship drums are, but I think that that's like okay. Like I think that that's just showing that us as like worship leaders and worship creators have learned to solve different problems and we're getting better at it. But like do it again, the elevation song, that's like a great example when the drums come in on the bridge, which is like arguably the biggest part of the song. At first they're just dun 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 dun
Doom.
dun 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 dun. Don't, because we're just trying to establish the foundation of let's clap, let's believe this, we're going to get this together. Come on, church. And
Yeah.
we want them to just feel that. Then the second bridge is dun, 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 dun,
Dun,
dun,
dun,
dun,
dun, dun.
dun, dun. And it starts building. And then the crescendo is just the full on beat where just all opens up and it's all just creating that energy and that anticipation for like what's, just the release. And so it's just finding those moments and learning how to build into those moments.
Yeah. Let's talk about a four-piece band. Let's say you come into a small church. I mean, the average church in America is 80 people, by the way. Not telling you, but I'm telling the listener. What would you do if you came into a church and it was you with an acoustic guitar, a piano player, maybe a cajon or a drum set, doesn't matter, but it's really like four people and a vocalist, right? Or two. How would you get a good sound out of that coming into that situation? I want you to speak into that because that's the reality that most worship leaders are faced with. And they're feeling discouraged because they're like, I don't have 8 guitars. I don't have 2 synths. I don't have a sub bass. We can get a good sound out of anyone. So how
Yeah,
would you come into that situation and arrange that band?
that's a
Or pick a
bold
song?
statement. That's a
Yeah.
bold statement. We can get a good sound out of anyone. I'm
I,
believing, I'm believing in that, in faith with you on that as well. No, but I think that there's a couple of different approaches. And I have played like in front of thousands of people in an arena with a three-piece band, acoustic, piano, drums. Multi-tracks is one of my favorite inventions of all time. If you're trying to create like a large sound, multi-tracks is like a good friend. That is a good friend to have. And don't be afraid to do it. Now, I'll be strategic. So, like, if I'm playing this thing and I'm setting out and I've got all my stems and my tracks laid out, and I know it's just me, keys, and drums, I'll keep the bass in, I'll keep the subs in. Usually, I'll keep electric guitars that are rhythm based in, or at least like diamonds in. I'll keep some of the pads and stuff in. I'll usually remove like a lead guitar, or I'll usually remove even like a lead synth because I'm not trying to create like the song as it is, like listening to an MP3. I'm trying to create like an energy and I'm trying to create the atmosphere for the song. And so that can make it sound big while at the same time not making everybody in the audience be like, who's playing that lead guitar? I don't even see a guitar up there. I'm trying
yeah.
not to distract in that sense, but I do want it to feel big. So that's just basic. If you're trying to get that big sound, we have resources to do it. What a time to be alive. That is an option. And what I do is I know also in those situations, I know my limitations. If I feel like I need to flow into a song, my drummer knows, all right, he's flowing now, but we don't have a bass player. So I'll never go back up to the summit of the mountain of sound when it's just the three piece with no bass. He might build behind me or wash behind me or keep like some sort of energy, but I know I'm going to have to create energy from my acoustic. I'm going to have to create energy from the way that I'm projecting my voice, from the way that I'm singing, because I won't be able to rely on like a full sound when
Mhm.
I'm flowing. But I have to prep my band for that. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
just have to know like my limitations. Now, the other approach, if it is just like we have a small band, we don't even have click or in ears, so we can't even use multi tracks. I am just a big believer that you can simplify things to the most basic level to get the best sound and the best option. And that comes from the years that I was leading with students for the youth ministry at my dad's church. And we had students that have only been playing guitar for a year. And it's like, okay, I know you can't play this hook, but what can you play? All right, let's simplify it to the most basic thing that you'll feel confident, you'll feel good, and it'll sound okay. You just have to know your limitations and know like it's almost like adding by subtracting. You're taking away, like, all right, we're not going to have like a full kit. So we take that away. We're not going to have like full electric guitars playing all the hooks. So, like, let's take that away. I can still play Lion and the Lamb with acoustic and piano and just a steady four of the floor kick on the cajon. We can do that and we can simplify it and we can make it sound good in the room for the people that we're serving. So I'm just like a big believer that you can continue to subtract things and deduct things until you get to like a base level of excellence, I guess.
Yeah, that's so good. Don't overcomplicate. Don't try, if you're in an acoustic or small band setting, don't try to be what you're not. Just embrace what it is and
Yep.
say, here. And those are usually the most sweet times of worship because the church can really hear themselves. It's simple. They're not being distracted by all the cool licks and drum fills. They're just like, wow, like it's just a straight beat and a clean guitar, down strums, like good rhythm, like
Yep.
make sure that everybody's tight on their rhythm and simple block chords on piano and maybe an occasional piano riff up top and you're good. Like you're golden. And then it's a
Yep.
harmony, add a harmony, and you can even sing the guitar riffs of Lion and the Lamb, you know,
Right.
oh,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
and
Totally.
the piano can mimic that. So yeah, I love
And you
that.
have apps, we have apps on our phone that have like pads. That's like,
Backing pads.
yeah, just like, all right, I just need like an A drone or a drone in C sharp. Even something like as simple as that. We have so many random tools now with technology that can just kind of create like a baseline that is like, okay.
Yeah, no, that's good. I want to talk about your new album. You just released this album a month ago called This Is Holy. And I want to talk about what you are most proud of about this album and maybe how it was different from your other albums. So we'll talk about your album and then we'll get into our Academy Q&A. So for the Academy members watching live, make sure you type your questions in. You can type them in now. Any questions you guys want about whether it's arranging or working with bands or anything you want to ask Mack at all, you can type in the chat. So Mack, talk to us about This Is Holy. What do you love about this album and how is it different or what are you proud about this album?
Yeah, I'm just really proud of the songs. And that's, as basic of an answer as you can get, but it's the truth. I've been writing some of these songs are like 3 years old, that I've been living with and a lot of rewrites and a. Lot of like digging.
Mm,
It's so interesting. Like the project kind of came together fast once we started getting in the studio and recording. But up to that point, there were so many songs that I was just like living with for months and for years. And so there was just a lot of like time to go back, revisit. Oh, wait, this chorus isn't quite there. Like, let's lock it in. And so doing that hard work is probably like what I'm most proud of. And I've loved getting to lead them in like, rooms with God's people and singing them and seeing them kind of come to life. So yeah, I'm just really proud of the way the songs turned out. I'm really proud of the production. I worked with a handful of like different producers who are all good friends and people that I love and amazing at what they do. So I think the record like just sounds so good. And I'm really proud of that song that my daughter has on it because I think it freaking rules.
yeah, I'm going to link the album below YouTube and podcast notes. But what songs do you feel like are going to really be utilized by the church? Because there's always a handful of songs that are like super congregational and they really hit. Which ones do you think our worship leaders
Yeah.
should definitely check out?
I think there's a song called Bless the Lord that is like a high energy, just kind of like praise song. I have another song called The Greatest Victory that is like a resurrection Easter song that carries a lot of energy and a lot of truth. It's like a good song for a room. There's a lot of like declarations in that song that people will like, they grab hold of in the room because it's like something that they want to declare, they want to
Mm.
sing. Yeah. And then, I mean, there are a bunch that I love.
What's the first song of the record called?
It's called We Praise the Lord. That's another one. I mean, I could keep going, but We Praise the Lord is like, that's another like high energy, like kind of first song in the set, just get the people at the 8:30 service, like kind of annoyed because they're getting it's so loud. No, but it's just like, it's a high energy song, like just a praise song. That's
Yeah.
kind of fun.
Really good call to worship song, like bring them in. I
Yeah.
loved that one a lot. I'm gonna check out
Yeah.
introducing that as well.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you.
Mac, before we move into our Academy Q&A, any like closing thoughts or encouragements for the worship leaders who will listen to this after the fact? It could be about arranging or working with your band, or it could just be a general encouragement to worship leaders that you want to share.
Man, I just want to let you know that I know how hard it is. Like what we do is difficult. It's like a heavy burden and it comes every single week and there's not many weeks off, And so like I know that you feel that weight and you feel that pressure, but it is such a high calling. What we get to do is such a gift what we get to do. And so find whatever it is in your life that you need to like rearrange or change to last in the long run and to not get burnt out. Like I encourage you, like keep pressing into those things. Find the ways to look forward to every weekend that you get to do this. Find the ways that you look forward to being with your team. You look forward to like what you get to be a part of. I fully acknowledge that we're in a grind, like it is not an easy job, but it is such a gift of a job. And so just encourage y'all on that.
No higher calling than what we get to do, which is help people connect with their creator. So,
Yeah,
Mac,
it's
thank you
amazing.
so much for sharing. And I'm going to tease a question. We won't answer it right now, but Amanda said you talked about simplifying and getting out of the way for the melody. When someone on your team is playing out too much, how do you tactfully help them back off? What is your language? Don't answer that. That is for Academy members only. If you're listening to this or watching this after the fact, please feel free to join us in the Academy. We have over 1,000 worship leaders in the Academy who are growing in their craft and calling. And so I'll run the outro, which will explain more about the Academy right now. But please join us. It's free for 15 days to check it out. So Mac, thank you. And we'll run the outro.
Thank you.
Academy members, hold tight. We'll be right back. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope this episode encouraged you, helped you, and pushed you forward in your ministry. If it helped you, can you take a second and help us by sending it to just one person that you think needs to hear this? And if you're feeling extra nice, leave us a nice, shiny 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, or like this video if you're watching it on YouTube. If you want to discuss this episode or ask questions, we do have a free section in our Academy where you can post comments and questions and chat with other worship leaders just like you, and also sample some of our courses. And you can go to worshipministrytraining.com/free to join us inside the free portion of the Academy. If you're looking for more, check out the Full Access Academy. You can get 15 days for just $1 to start and try things out. Again, you can try all of it for 15 days for just $1 by going to worshipministrytraining.com. Hope to see you inside the Academy, or else I'll see you next month for another helpful episode.